was one of my favourite of all Bach's Obbligati, the Qui Sedis from the B minor Mass, which he composed in stages in Leipzig between the years 1733 and 1749. It sits beautifully under the fingers on the instrument and I think shows off the innate qualities of the oboe d'amore, particularly its ability to blend and imitate the human voice, in this case the alto voice. The instrument I'm playing on has been made by the fantastic oboist Alfredo Bernardini, and he's copied a surviving d'amore made by the maker J.H. Eichentopf, who was a very well-known maker in Leipzig, living and working there at the same time that Bach was also there. So how was it that the alto member of the oboe family came to acquire the name Oboe d'amour, the oboe of love? Well, it was most likely due to its affinity with the already existing instruments, the viola d'amour and the flute d'amour, whose soft, dulcet tones were well established and loved in Leipzig music circles at the beginning of the 18th century. And I'm sure it's also due to its mellow, dark sound that it earned its title and the way it could conjure up any emotions you might associate with love, be it melancholy or calm content or even rustic happiness. So what is it that makes the oboe d'amore sound so different from the treble oboe? First impressions are that they look quite similar. They only have two keys at the bottom and the bore is a similar size on both. However, the oboe d'amore is an instrument in A, which means that it's a little bit longer than the other oboe, about 3 centimetres to be precise. It also has this characteristic bulb bell, which is different from the flared bell of the treble oboe. Its reed is slightly wider, and the vocal and reed length together are longer than that of the treble oboe. But what really makes a difference to the sound is where the tone holes are placed on the oboe d'amore. They're lower down, and at the bottom there are no venting holes, unlike with the treble oboe. And it's these two factors that really give the instrument that mellow, slightly muted sound, which we also associate with instruments like the viola d'amore. The Qui Sedis from the B minor Mass, the movement I played at the beginning of this video, is, perhaps unsurprisingly, in B minor. Now this would be a trickier key on the treble oboe because of the cross fingerings involved for notes such as G sharp and A sharp. On the d'amore it becomes D minor, which is a much more comfortable key for the oboist. So having a oboe available in A meant that Bach could write for keys such as F sharp minor, A major, E major, and use oboe much more than he might otherwise have done. And the concerto in A, BWV 1055, is a good example of this. The outside movements are in C major for the oboe d'amore while the strings are playing in A, and the beautiful slow movement is in F sharp minor, but the oboist can languish in the relative comfort of A minor. Bach really favoured the oboe as an obbligato instrument. He wrote far more for all three types of oboe than he did for any other instrument. Something like 235 obbligati have survived from his entire lifetime, whereas the violin, for example, only has 92. 200 of those were written while he was in Leipzig. And of those 200, he wrote just as many for the d'amore as he did for the treble oboe. When Bach took up his post in 1723 in Leipzig, the oboe d'amore was already quite well established in the city. The earliest surviving instrument that we have today is from around 1719, and it seems clear that composers were writing before that for the instrument, around 1717 and maybe even earlier. So it was very much in vogue when he arrived, and I'm sure it's no coincidence for his audition piece for the post at the Thomaskirche that he included two very demanding oboe d'amore parts in the cantata BWV 23, thus paying homage to this popular Leipzig instrument and also establishing the role that he was going to give the instrument in the years to come. He was probably also recognising the fact that the principal oboist in Leipzig at the time was one of the greatest players of his generation. His name was Caspar Gleditsch, and he must have really been an outstanding oboist for Bach to be inspired to write so much for the instrument. We oboists today can really be grateful to him that we've got so many beautiful obligati to play. By the way, the second oboist, one Gottfried Kornagel, can't have been too bad either. The second parts are normally equal to the first parts, of course, but quite often they are trickier. The d'Amore's popularity only really lasted for 40 years and was confined mainly to Germany. It was actually Telemann who was responsible for making the instrument famous, as he was by far the more popular composer of the two at that time. Quite a number of his works with d'Amore have survived, and one you may have heard of is the Triple Concerto for oboe d'amore, viola d'amore and flute. And this piece really shows how beautifully these gentle sounding instruments blend and work together. By the 1760s, the instrument wasn't really being written for anymore. And as the orchestra expanded towards the end of the century, there seemed to be no place for an alto oboe in the wind section. So we really are very lucky that Bach left us with such a wealth of repertoire for this instrument, which ensured that it didn't remain obsolete forever. I'm going to leave you with the opening of the beautiful movement Quia Respexit from the Magnificat BWV 243.